All right, so today we'll take care of, well, we will expand on the idea that we carried on last time, which was the installation concepts. And during that, we talked about the building structures that I might encounter. I couldn't tell you everything because every situation is different, but I give you the general scope of what you might see on the job sites and possibly how to go about it. All right, so you got some idea based on that last lecture. Then today we're going to expand on that. We're going to start the something that's I call tools and equipment for the infrastructure technician according to the job performed. All right, so we're just going to go in a little bit more in depth, continuing from the last time we saw each other. All right, so on the opening screen, I have thrown a bunch of tools. That's not all that you're going to use, and not all of the tools are going to be used at all times. But I need to give you some heads up on what you possibly might want to start getting for yourself. When it comes to gathering tools for this type of a job, which is like network technician or cable technician or infrastructure technician or IT technician or data person, there are many names for this type. They mean the same thing. You install the infrastructure, which is lay down the wiring, and then you terminate that to whatever standards you need to terminate. Sometimes you're going to have to use phone standards. Sometimes you're going to have to use data standards, and sometimes coaxial cables, sometimes optical fiber, right? So then after terminating that, you're going to have to install equipment as far as mounting racks on the wall, dressing up the equipment racks on the floor, and then connecting the equipment according to the instructions you will be given. And when it comes to jobs today, the instructions to you are going to be given in the form of binder this stick, and maybe on top of that there's going to be another binder this stick. And there goes your weekend because the installation is on Monday. So sometimes well, not sometimes, but all that hard work that you're doing, going to school here, studying hard and coordinating within yourself the timing for different subjects. It's all giving you a little bit of a glimpse on what's coming in the future when you come when it comes to doing the work. Actually, right? That thing never ends. You're going to constantly be upgrading yourself with new systems coming out, maybe some new standards, new procedures, and whatnot. And you will be given the opportunity to upgrade. And usually it happens by the manufacturers. If the manufacturer is coming up with new system, new equipment, new procedures, they are in contact with the distributors who sell their equipment. And the distributors gather many brands. And that's where the equipment comes from that your boss is buying. Or if you go to business by yourself, you are going to be buying those that equipment from those distributors. And usually in our local area here, some of the distributors are in London, but a lot of them are in the GTA area, Greater Toronto area. So Mississauga, Oakville, Brampton, that's the new local thing. We used to have most of them around here in London, but a lot of them moved out, closed down the offices, and moved out to GTA. And those distributors, with those distributors, you're going to, if you're running your own business sometime in the future, you will register yourself with those distributors, and they will have you on their email list. And if there is any kind of a training session that is going to be provided by the manufacturer, it's going to happen on that distributor's ground. Okay, and so they will get you into the bigger conference room. They will feed you with sandwiches, coffee, and donuts. And there's going to be a rep from that company, and that rep is going to present the whatever they need to present, new equipment, new procedures, and whatnot. So that's how it happens. All the upgrading, that's how it happens. So you're going to have to do a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of upgrading. That's the nature of this kind of business, and that's pretty much happens like everywhere else with everything. With everything that has to do with the job field. Even like, for example, sometimes I used to do, I would be servicing some systems that were in Tim Hortons. Okay, so you might think that somebody comes to Tim Hortons and works there behind the counter. I noticed that even if you work for example for Tim Hortons, you will know what I mean, because I see that employees there, they also do have to go through different trainings and procedures that have to do with whatever the job is involved. So any kind of work, you are going to do some upgrading, reading, and studying. Okay. Now, as far as the tools, well, very rarely you're going to spend maybe $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 to get all the equipment at once. So start small, go on with the basics. And one by one, you're going to be adding, maybe next year you're going to get a new drill. Maybe you're going to see some deal on some set of screwdrivers or things like that. So maybe a new fish line or fiberglass rods or whatnot, or sometimes a stud finder or some laser equipment just to level things up. You'll be adding that to your arsenal of things one by one, and over the years things build up. You're going to end up with some nice collection of tools. So today I'm going to give you some heads up on the tools that are involved in this business. Right? I also have included the helpful links in our YouTube playlist. The list of tools that are involved in this job by other people that pretty much all over the world, that they present their perspective on what the tools. And I haven't found one yet that lists everything that you need, because you know what, it's pretty much impossible. Everybody's job is a little tiny bit different flavor. Some people are going to concentrate more on the security alarms, and then they'll do something else, everything else, but not as much. Some other people might be concentrating on just doing the data work, so they will concentrate getting the tools for that, with that in mind. So here's my perspective on that, and this is the part one of the two. And even then, if I spend 10 hours on this, I wouldn't be able to list everything and pretty much foresee every possible situation. Sometimes you just you go on the job site and you go, oh, with this one I need this specialty type of a drill bit, because I'm up against some sort of material that I need. So yes, okay, is there any distributor around here? Is there any local hardware store that I can go and get one? So sometimes there are situations like that as well. All right, so what do we have on this opening screen? First thing I'm going to mention is the ladder, and I'm going to elaborate on some things like that. So I've listed, I've put in some, it's a 6-foot step ladder, and that's probably the most, the ladder that you're going to use the most. Once you get on the job site, installing wiring and installing equipment and all that kind of stuff, you're almost going to be, that ladder is going to be almost attached to your hip. Okay, you're going to be walking with that, using it all the time. So get a good fiberglass ladder, and I would refer you to the class, to the lectures on the ladders that we did last term with SFTY, I think 150. So get a good fiberglass ladder. The aluminum kind of home use ladders are okay, but just think about this. You're going to be using that thing day in and out. The home use ladder is meant to sit in the basement and you're going to use it once, maybe every 2 months or so, 2 or 3 months, if your light bulb in your kitchen needs to be replaced. So it's not getting used as much. But this one here, you're going to be doing day in, day out, 8 hours a day, maybe more, and using like that every day, that home use ladder wouldn't last long. Plus, well, so aside from having to buy the new ladders all the time, more often than you want, then also it puts you a little bit in danger, okay? Because when ladder gets deteriorated and you're stepping on it, you're raising your height a little bit more, so you're getting yourself on certain type of height, and if you fall down, then you can get yourself hurt. And how high do you have to be to actually get injured? There's no limit. You could be sitting in the chair and fall off that chair, and you can hurt yourself that way. Okay, so get a good ladder. Now, aside from the 6-foot step ladder, it's a good idea to have an 8-foot step ladder and a 10-foot step ladder, because in some situations the 6-foot ladder is not enough. Why wouldn't you just get 10-foot ladder? Well, sometimes those 2 feet make a difference if you have to carry it all the time around the construction site. So if you have to carry less and 8-foot ladder is what you need, then you're going to use the 8-foot ladder. And sometimes you're going to need 10-foot step ladders. So you're going to have to get all 3. Eventually, you're going to end up having that. Aside from that, I'll also encourage you to get an extension ladder. And the most popular one would be the 20-foot extension ladder. Also get a nice fiberglass ladder, because you're going to be using those a lot. Plus, if you're going to do some electrical work, it's not a good idea to use aluminum ladder because it's conductive, right? So enough said about that. All right, so 20-foot step ladder, extension ladder is also something that, if you're gonna get something bigger, then there will be a special kind of a project. Aside from the ladders, when we talk about working on heights, it's a good idea, really extremely good idea, more than a good idea. It's almost pretty much a must. You will have to arm yourself with 2 types of licensing tickets, okay? And the tickets are working on heights ticket. And if you don't have that ticket, it's a plastic card. You receive training and you get the little plastic card that says you have completed the working on heights training, signed by so-and-so who did that training, okay? If you don't have that ticket with you, if you're working on any official construction site, even if you carry through a hallway any kind of a ladder that is taller than 6-foot step ladder, you might actually get kicked off the site by the safety officer. You don't even have to be on that. It's even if you carry it. So that's how serious the safety officers get these days on the construction sites. Then another ticket would be lift ticket. Those tickets get different names over the times. They change the names, but it's basically a training, proof of training that you have received, that you can use lifting devices such as scissor lift, a boom lift, and sometimes something that's called a man lift. All right. If that's also extremely serious, because if you get caught by a safety officer using any of that equipment without proper training and proof of that, it might cost you a lot of money, and it might cost your boss a lot of money. Okay, so get those. Where do you get those? Most of the places that provide the rental places that rent that sort of stuff, when they rent the scissor lifts, the boom lifts, and all that. And the ticket is right now, if you get the lift ticket, is up to right now 180 feet. So that's a lot. That's high, you know. So those rental places, they do provide training as well. They have trained people who will train you, and it might cost you Well, a little bit, anywhere from between $400 and $500 to get a training for the working on heights and get a training on the get the lift ticket. Okay, but it's well worth it. You're gonna make it up soon enough. All right, and then after that, all you have to do is basically keep renewing it for a small fee. I'm not sure, it might cost you a few bucks. Not every year. Maybe it's going to be some of them. Some of them give you the ticket that's worth 3 years. Some of them 5 years. It depends on the company and the rules that are being applied and implemented at that time. All right, so that's as far as ladders. You will need that, okay, because you'll be going up in the ceiling, in the walls, on top of the walls, and running all kinds of wires and mounting all kinds of equipment. Okay. Now, right beside the ladder, I do have something like a drill, and this obviously this looks like a cordless drill, and it is. It's a good idea to have a good, nice cordless drill. Right, that it's light enough so you can use that to drill some regular type of holes. Maybe a ½ inch, 1/4 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and it's light enough so you can carry it around with you. Right. Also, that one you can use as a screwdriver. Right, to drive screws and nuts and bolts into things. I would not recommend to use hand tools to just, maybe if it's one or two, and you just happen to not have that drill with you, then yeah, you're just going to pull it out of your tool belt and drive that screw in wherever it's going. But if you have, if you're mounting a rack and you're going to use a lot of something that's called rack screws, and rack screws are the type of screws or bolts that are mounting the equipment into the rack. So the equipment is a certain length, and they have a couple of holes for a single rack space. 4 holes. It mounts that piece of equipment in the rack, in the rails, okay? And then some of them are double rack and triple rack spaces and some not. But if you have the whole thing to do, you're not going to use that hand thing. You're just going to use zip, zip, zip. First of all, it's more efficient and it saves time. And it is actually safer because you're not straining your hands while doing that repetitive work. And if you do repetitive work, you can get injured that way as well. And those injuries usually don't show up right away. They show up years later. Okay, so that's as far as that. Now, I might encourage you to get a hammer drill, right? And they will be cordless hammer drill. And the hammer drill is the difference between hammer drill and just a regular drill. It's the regular drill. It just gives you the rotary motion, okay? And it's just to drive the drill bit and turn it around. Okay, so when it comes to hammer drill, it not only makes things spin around, but it gives a repetitive vibratory type of an impact. So it's as if you were hitting it with a hammer. That's why it's called hammer drill. And you need that hammer action on the drill if you drill into harder surfaces such as concrete. Okay, you would not use hammer drill if you're drilling something in the steel because you're just going to damage the drill bit. Right? After about 30 seconds, you have no drill bit. You're just going to dull it up. But if you're driving something that's called a concrete drill bit into a concrete, if you don't have a hammer drill, just a regular, yes, you can still drill that hole, but you are going to spend a lot of time and energy doing that. Whereas if you have the hammer drill, it just goes almost right into like into batter. Okay, in most cases, if the hole is small enough. Now, when you're talking about bigger holes, like 3/4 of an inch or a ½ inch, and the concrete is hard enough, then even a hammer drill, you're going to have some strain. It's going to cause you to use some sort of energy to drill that. So the cordless hammer drill is going to help you with some smaller holes in the concrete. Okay. and one or two or few of them. Right now, when it comes to drilling some more heavy duty, when it comes to doing some heavy duty drilling, you will need a drill that basically has the good old-fashioned cord attached to it, and you plug it into the wall, and you can use extension cord or whatnot. But sometimes the cordless drill doesn't have enough oomph, enough power, especially when the battery is kind of halfway drained or so. Okay, so sometimes you need that, and you need so also get a nice power tool that has a hydro cord attached to it. So just so you need that much more energy when you do that. And then in some specialty cases, when you're going to do a lot of heavier drilling, like for example, stuff that we're going to mention later on in the second part of this lecture, like drop-in anchors. Okay, those require, in order to mount some raceways in this concrete ceiling, then you're going to not only have to use the powered type of a drill, hammer drill, but it's going to be a little bit heavier duty hammer drill, and sometimes you can rent those, okay, because they, the price goes up when it comes. And sometimes if you do a lot of work like that, you might want to buy your own. Okay, so that's as far as drills. Okay. Now, I'm going to mention this little gadget and this little gadget right here. This little gadget is a data cable qualifier. Right? And this is just like a quick test device. The qualifier, and also I haven't listed, is something that's called a certifier. The qualifier will, this is the one that we used a lot in our class during our labs. This will check for the wire map when it comes to data cable. It will check the wire mapping to see if all the connections are made. It is going to check for the length, if it's not too long, because if it's longer than 328 feet, any kind of data wire is going to be failed link due to length, okay? Because you can only have certain length when it comes to data cabling. All right, and it's going to perform light duty frequency response and signal response test, okay? And it's going to qualify the link as, let's say, Cat5e or Cat6 or whatnot. Now, aside from that, it's not, and the tests can be saved and they can be presented to the client in a PDF form with every jack labeled, whatever the label is. You can have those test results provided to the client in a PDF form, okay? Or you can print them out as well. Then there's the certifier. Certifier, the difference between this and this qualifier and certifier is maybe anywhere from, first difference would be about $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 difference, okay, to purchase that. Because this qualifier, it might cost you something like $1,000 if you get a good deal somewhere, and sometimes I can see the prices going up. So I saw some of them being sold for $1,500, almost $2,000. Right? Then the certifier is going to cost you about somewhere in the range between $8,000 and $10,000, and it has different attachments. It would have attachments to test for the Ethernet cable. It will have attachment to test for the coaxial cable. It will have attachments to test for the optical fiber. And then not only it qualifies, but the tests it performs there are more tests that it does, and there are more rigorous tests, and it's going to so-called certify the link. And a lot of the bigger clients actually request that in their contracts, that all the links that you're going to install, if they're going to pay for Cat6a installation, they want to make sure that they actually have what they paid for, they actually received. And then that's why we are, Mr. Habinski and I, we are so meticulous about you punching those wires in a certain way. If there's a little bit too much untwist, and it doesn't take much for the Cat6 to reject the certification, All right, so all the especially the twist has to be done right to the punch. And then we're explaining it to you. Don't damage those wires. Don't step on them, because if you step on the wires, you're damaging the structure of that. And if you damage structure, you lose the twist on that place when you stepped in. And then even if you massage it into place, Cat 6 is not going to forgive you that. Kinks in the wire. So if you run the wire and it just does a little bit of a kink here, right? And then if it does that, there's a kink there. That also disqualifies the cable from Cat 6 at least. Okay, so it is extremely important to take care of those wires. Now, this little gadget here, you might have that in your toolbox, just for quick check. It basically, all it does is going to test for the wire mapping. Right? Just to make sure that all the connections are there, and it might actually tell you the difference whether you have a straight link or crossover link. And that thing might cost you, if you get a good deal somewhere, you can get it for $40, maybe $20 used, or $60 new, or $80 new. It's a good idea to have. Now, as far as diagnostic equipment, also here is the toner, right here. The toner consists of tone generator and a probe. A tone generator will, besides other things, it might test for continuity. Every little company has a little different ways of doing those. But basically, the main reason for having that is to be able to inject a tone into a pair. So you get the connector that's coming out of the tone generator, you clip on directly onto the pair that you're using, and that is going to introduce a tone. And with some of them, you can switch from a continuous tone that's going to sound like beep, right? Quite annoying. And you can also switch to a alternate frequency tone like dee 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 dee, much better to notice. And once you introduce that tone into the pair, you can go on the other side and look for that pair on the other side of the cable. And sometimes it's in completely different room. If things are not labeled. So that's what we use for tracing the wires and checking them also for integrity, for structural integrity. Because once you look for that tone with the probe, and the probe has a little speaker here, and when you move that probe close to the wire, you're going to vaguely hear that tone. And if you move closer and closer in that area, you're going to hear that tone stronger. And if you touch the pair with the tip of the probe, you're going to hear a really strong signal, right? So then, just to make sure that this is actually the pair, not a bleed through from another pair, you can actually connect a couple of wires to it, and sometimes you can, if it's a BIX, there's something called BIX clips. You can see on the BIX presentation that I did, and you clip onto that and you short that pair. Once you short that pair, the tone should disappear because you just shorted that, right? If the tone doesn't disappear, there could be one or two options. One, it could be that that you didn't get the right pair. It's just a bleed through from another pair, so it could be the one beside it, right? Or if one of the wires from that pair is broken. So then when you shorted that, is still the signal doesn't disappear. That means the circuit is not complete. The circuit is not closed. You still can hear that tone. And if that's the pair, then the pair is not good because you don't have a pair. You just have one wire and the other one is broken. Okay? So it's for tracing wires that are not labeled. It is a must-have tools, just like you need to work boots, safety boots, hard hat, safety glasses, and you need your hands and knowledge. You need yourself on the job site. That is going to be heavily used by you. Okay? And get some good quality stuff. Fluke is good. Those toners and pretty much all the devices that we have, sometimes they fall off the ladders. Okay, so get something that is rigid enough. All right. Behind that, you can see a basic screwdriver set, and that symbolizes everything else, all the tool equipment that you have in a tool belt. So there's the basic tools. I'm not going to list, tape measure or pencil to write things down, or maybe side cutters or needle nose pliers or whatever, channel locks. That is given that you're going to have that kind of stuff, because if you don't, why bother showing up for work? Because there's nothing you can do. You can't cut wire with your hands. Right, so that's about that. And over here, let's move quickly to the left here. A multimeter. It's just working with electronics, electricity, telecommunications. You are going to have to use a multimeter more often than not. Okay, so as opposed to somebody who bakes bread, they're going to have to use completely different tools, like they're going to have some sort of a thermometer stuck in their pocket, right? You don't need a thermometer, right? Or if you're a doctor, you're going to use a stethoscope. That's your basically bread and butter tool. You need a multimeter. Okay? And also, aside from DMM, which is digital multimeter, I would say it's a really good idea, and that doesn't have to be expensive. You can just go and get a cheap one that has it's the analog, because sometimes when especially voltage that you're measuring, it fluctuates. It stays in maybe one space and it just fluctuates a little bit. Digital multimeter is not going to give you an accurate reading, because it's going to try to count up and down, and you're just going to see a bunch of numbers flashing. When you have a needle, you're going to see the movement. Okay, so excuse me. So that. Then I'm going to leave the laptop for last. Over here, you can see a fish tape. So fish tape with the fiberglass rods, or rods, period. Okay, fish tape is used to pull wire. Where do you use fish tape? Most of the time, you're going to use fish tape. You're going to push that fish tape into a raceway, such as conduit. Okay? And then you're going to push that enough. This is it's a metallic. This one is a metallic one, but there are also fiberglass ones. So that thing is rolled into that roll, and you just pull it out, and when you're done, you just roll it back into it, and you can store it away. All right, so you push that into raceways such as conduit, EMT, and you just keep pushing until it comes out on the other side, wherever the other end is. And on the other end, on that end, when it comes out, you can do two things. You can tie a wire that you're going to pull through, and you just keep pulling it, and you get the wire in the pipe, right? Or you can tie a string, just a regular twine string, like a rope. And pull that and tie it at both ends, because sometimes when you install EMT, in the contract, it's mentioned that all the conduits and raceways that they're going to install, they have to be strung. What does it mean that they have to be strung? They have to have strings in it for the next people who are going to, maybe it's going to have for yourself, but if there is a company that you work for and they got a contract in installing the EMT raceways, and in the contract says they have to be strung, that means probably somebody else is going to come over, other company is going to come over and do the data. Or it could be the electricians do it for you, and you could be the data person. Okay, so you can tie a string and then tie the string at both ends and leave it that way. The longest practical one would be something like 100 feet, and it's actually pushing it a little bit, because the longer you push, the longer you pull that out, the harder it gets to push into the pipes, right? So 60, 100 feet is the most you want to get, right? There's no such thing as 600 feet fish tape, right? Because the longer it gets to the point that you just keep pushing it and it just doesn't want to go anymore. It starts binding against, so but then again, the EMT raceways are supposed to be installed in such way that you can actually shove a fish in it and have it come out on the other end, right? So the metallic ones are good for the most part, but if you are going to add more wires into a conduit that already has some existing wires, then you might want to use a fiberglass one, because it's gentler on things. Shoving in the metallic fish might actually damage the existing wires. That's one. Two, quite often you're going to have to use some lubricants, and you're going to have to lubricate that fish periodically when you put that in, so it can actually go and weave itself around the other wires. If you don't, you can actually damage the existing wires that are inside the pipe. And as far as using lubricants, get the ones that are designed for cable installations, right? In any hardware store right now, they will carry those. those lubricants. They are designed for that. What do I mean by that? I have seen people using, because they ran out of lube or they forgot that, and they have to install a wire, and they would just go to the washroom and get a paper towel and put some liquid soap on it, and that gives you enough lubrication on that. Don't do that. Please do not do that. The reason for that is you don't know the chemical consistency of that soap, and you don't know what that is going to do to the jacketings of the wire, because the jacketing is PVC plastic based jacketing, and it might not happen right away, but that thing is going, once you put that lubricant there, it stays there, right? And sometimes it's going to dry out and sometimes it won't. But if you put in the wrong thing, that is you're going to make it stay there. As the time goes by, as the time goes with the time, that thing actually might dissolve some jacketing and damage the wiring. It can cause a lot of damage. It's not going to come right away, right? It might take some time. So that's as far as fish tapes. Now, fiberglass rods. They are fiberglass sticks. And notice that on one side, every stick on one side has the female version of a thread, and then it has the male version of a thread. So you can stack them together. They're very useful if you want to get, if you see a long cable tray, right? Very useful when it comes to that. You can just keep stacking them and just keep pushing and pushing until you get to wherever you pull the wire or a string on the other end, pull it back. Very, very useful. They're also useful when pushing the wires or pulling wires inside the walls that have maybe some fiberglass insulation or something like that. They're stiff enough. Fish is just going to go, is the fish line, it's just going to change direction and just go somewhere that you never know where it's going to come out. That fiberglass thing, it's nice and straight, and so you can just push it right to where you want. Okay, and then you can find some different attachments. Just go to some sort of a hardware store in the electrical section, and you can see those fiberglass rods, and they're usually in those transparent tubes, right? And the attachments are supposed to help you with getting around certain obstacles in a certain way. Okay, and then this one here, you can see a chain. That's very useful because you can push that thing with a chain into a space in the wall, and where it comes down to the opening, you can just push in like a telescopic magnet, like on a stick, and that magnet is going to catch that chain and it's going to pull it out. It's all about making the job more efficient and more efficient. Over here, we have a punch down tool, right? And different punch down. If you're planning to get any of those, please, even if you're out of school, send me an email. Ask me for opinion on this, on that. It's what I recommend. Because I spent over 30 years on the job sites. I know what's good and I know what's not. If you get something that is not good because it's a good deal, it's going to cost you that much more, because eventually you're still going to have to spend the proper money for the proper tool, and it's just going to be more expensive for you because you spent money on something that's not going to do the job, right? Drill bits, you're going to constantly keep buying those, and sometimes you're just going to get those regular bits, sometimes you're going to get the concrete bits, sometimes cone-shaped bits, spade bits, for different and sometimes some of them are going to be shorter, some of them are longer. You're going to build your own collection of drill bits. Trust me, when you go on different job sites, you're going to also, when you start working, you're going to watch other people using their equipment, so ask questions. They will help you with that. Right? I have listed a laptop. Why do I need a laptop on a job site? Especially on the service calls, but also in some installations, you're going to be asked to configure certain type of equipment. And you might ask to just get your laptop up and running and connect. So with that, you're going to have to carry maybe a better length, maybe a 50, 60 foot of Ethernet cable, just the one that the patch cord that we made in one of our labs. So you can connect to certain switches, hubs, not hubs, but some gateways, modems, and whatnot, in order to program them. Because quite often when you do fresh installation from scratch or service calls, you're going to have to tap into certain equipment, and within the work order, you're going to have phone numbers of the companies who take care of the IT, but some of the programming has to be done on site simply because maybe the equipment is offline. They can't log into it to program it, change the programming. You have to physically go in there, connect to it with your laptop, and you're going to be on the phone. So get yourself a good, maybe wireless Bluetooth thing, because you have to give you a hands-free, or what I find it works the best is just the headphones, the earbuds that you plug into your phone. So you have the both hands-free, and you're going to have to sometimes connect to modems, switches, and gateways and whatnot. And you'll be with the tech support on the phone telling you what to do with the laptop. So I'll get the idea of how to use how to call up a command prompt. It's very, very popular thing to use on the equipment. Aside from the Ethernet cable that you will carry with the laptop, I would recommend that you get yourself something that's called a serial interface. Okay. Serial interface, Google that, what it is. It's a box that on one side it has a USB cable ending that you plug into USB port on the computer, and on the other side it has RS-232 serial port. And sometimes you're going to have to carry a length of a serial cable, RS-232 serial cable. Get different gender benders, because some of the equipment, they have a male output on there, they have a female output, and if you just have one type of cable, sometimes you won't be able to connect that. So get a bunch of, get yourself a stash of gender benders so you can put on one end or the other, so you can actually connect to your serial interface and to the equipment that you need to connect. Right, so that's one. Also, there's something that's called a console cable. My thing is dripping. Console. It's like getting a font. Console cable. Wow, my marker just spilled. Console cable. Some of the equipment, most of the equipment right now, you should be able to connect with either Ethernet, USB, or serial cable. Okay, some of them need to be configured through something that's called a console port, and that also goes with the interface, and you need that console cable. It's a very popular thing. Research that. Order it on Amazon or whatever, Alibaba, that's DigiKey online, or just go to some electrical distributor. Some of them do have the console cables. You're not going to use it a lot, but the biggest thing is, why do you need to get good brakes on the car? Because you need to use them just for that one time that is going to save your life. It's not going to be a lifesaver, but when you're out and about, and for some reason you need the console cable to connect to the equipment. If you don't have it, it's going to feel not that good. Okay, so that's laptop, important. Okay, I think we have gone through all of that. Let's just quickly go through some other things. Wow, we just spent a lot of time on this thing. Project stages and tools involved. All right, so we're going to cover something that's called survey, assessment, site work, commissioning, and billing. Right. Site work, and also I haven't mentioned the deliverables, but the deliverables are part of the site work. On the basis of the work is not done until the paperwork is done. So I just didn't mention that, because the deliverables, and we have spent a lot of time getting those habits to you, that you fill out the deliverables. You present them in a certain way. What's the certain way? The deliverables are presented to whoever asks them the way they ask you. So that's why we're so strict about you following the instructions to the T. It's not because we just want it that way and that's it, because it makes us feel good, because I'm telling you something and you do it. No, it is to develop the habits in you. And once you develop the good habits, it's just going to be that much easier for you when you go to the so-called real work situation. Okay? So Survey, site survey. What did I write here? It's an inspection of an area where work is planned. Okay, so here's a sentence. And another sentence, the type of the survey and the best practices required depend on the nature of the project. I got that thing from Wikipedia, I think. A good way of presenting some sort of a definition. An inspection of an area, basically what it is. You need, okay, first of all, you need notepad, camera to take pictures, lots of pictures. You need notepad to make notes. You need basic tools like measuring tape, basic screwdrivers if you need to open some panels and take a closer look at what's inside. You need flashlight, that's a given. You will need some ladder because you may have to step up and take a closer look at some things. Of course, you need some PPE and PPE because on some job sites that you're going to walk in to do the survey, you will require the PPE just to walk in there, right? And knowledge, that's the biggest thing, because you're not going to be sent to perform a survey if you're just starting out in the business, right? Usually people who do the survey are the people who work for a certain length of time, that they're really comfortable with the procedures, installations, equipment that's needed. They know the job inside out. They have done it a few times. They know what to predict in terms of needs of the job. So what's a survey? An inspection of an area where the work is planned. It's going in there and making notes of what's needed, right? And making notes, doing drawings, requesting the floor layouts, all that stuff. And you're going to either do it for yourself so you can prepare a proper quote, or you're going to do it so somebody else, based on the information that you give them, they're going to be able to perform a proper quote and give the pricing for the job. Now, quoting is extremely important. Accurate quoting is extremely important, because if it's a small job and you misquote, you might lose $200 or $500 or even $1,000. It feels bad because that's not the point. You're in business to make money, not to lose money. But if you even lose $2,000 or $1,000, it's something that you can survive, right? And take some lessons from it, learn from it, and don't do that mistake again. But if you do a bigger job, I mean the job that the client is required to pay $200,000, $500,000, if you misquote on that, then you can bring the whole company down and just close it down completely, right? So it's extremely important to that. But you're not going to do the surveys right away, right? Site assessment. I just put assessment, but it's basically preparing quotes, right? Based on the survey notes, you're going to be able to do pricing, either you or somebody else who works with you, right? So pricing, evaluation, estimate, documentation, quote, that's all basically almost like synonyms, almost. What do you need? You need suppliers, distributors to get the equipment. As you register your business, or if you work for some business, they have contacts with distributors. They don't go to their local hardware store to pick up this stuff. They have contacts with the distributors, and sometimes they get it straight from the manufacturers, but very, very seldom. Most of the stuff comes through the distributors right now. Then you need to know the prices based on the distributor's contacts. You will need some sort of office set up as far as tools. And of course, again, you're going to need some sort of knowledge, extensive knowledge, because if you quote right, good. If you misquote, it can be trouble. Some troubles are bigger than others. All right, then site work. And we're going to continue with site work on the further slides. Commissioning. What is a commissioning? After the job is done, well, it needs to be handed to the client. If you run a window washing business, right? You get clients, you wash the windows. You don't need to call the owner of the company and say, look, I washed the windows and I used this here, and there was a bit of a spot in the right corner, but I cleaned it. You're not going to do that. You just wash the windows and go home, right? But when it comes to installing, systems that work a certain way, you're going to need to train the client on how the system works, all the ins and outs, and all the technicalities that go with it, right? So it's a system presentation, right? It's called commissioning, right? So for that, what do you need? You need you need the audience, because you can't talk to yourself, and you need some facilities, like a conference room or whatnot. So that's basically when people talk about commissioning, I just explain that to you, what it is, right? And sometimes you take half an hour to explain that to the owner of the company, and sometimes it takes the whole day, and sometimes it takes a whole week, because the company could be huge enough that they have different departments. And if it's, for example, if you're doing a telephone system, you're going to use different departments trained, and because you can't get everybody at the same time, and maybe different departments will have different type of training on how to use this specific particular system. Right, so it's 10:53. I'm going to go a few minutes over, so if you need to go, please go. I'm going to continue, and I'm going to post that so you can watch the finishing of this presentation at a later time. Okay, so I'm just going to continue. All right, so after that comes the billing, and I just put a little thing here. This is how you get paid. All right, not really, but it's a funny thing to show. So money given to you, all right? So the money can be used for the island that you always wanted. You can buy that, maybe. Or maybe you can buy a car that you always wanted, or you can invest in buying more tools that will let you do more work, so you can get more money, so you can get the island, or never mind, okay. All right, site work, raffin section. And we went through that, but I'm going to expand on that a little bit. It's like a preamble to the next slide. After planning the cable distribution, what does that mean? You get the layout of the whole building, and you mark on the layout, on the drawing. Here we need a telephone jack. Here we need 2 data jacks. Here we need 1 telephone jacks and 5 data jacks. At this point, we're going to have a speaker connected to the amplifier. At this point, there's going to be a wireless access point. Here's going to be reception phone. So all that stuff. And during the survey, you are going to work out all the possible ways of how to get the wire from one point to another. And some of the surveys take half an hour, some of the surveys take an hour, some of the surveys take a whole week if the company is big enough and the job will be complicated enough. Based on how you do the survey, it is going to affect the way you perform the job. Okay? Because if you do the survey properly and document everything properly, whoever is going to come to do the installation, they will know exactly what they need to bring, and they will know exactly what they need to do. But if you do the survey not as well, then the installation crews can come up to some sort of obstacles that they didn't foresee, and it's going to affect the price of the job. Well, the price is not going to be affected. It's going to affect the time that you spent on the job, and then if you spend more time than you allocated for, then the extra time is costing you money. Right, so after planning the cable distribution, the raffing stage begins. Basically, what you do is you pull all the cables from the home run location to the destination locations, and you just coil them in the ceiling most of the time, or secure them in some sort of way, so you can come back to them and terminate them later. Right, so that's a raffing stage, and I just put a little hook, like a J hook, and we'll talk about those as well. I just wanted to mention that thing there. Now, in that stage, all cables are pulled from a home run location to their destinations. The cables are coiled up in bundles at both ends. I just put a little thing on the picture here. The cables are coiled up in bundles at both ends, but not terminated. Okay, this is the rough-in stage. Make sure that all cables are clearly identified at both ends. We went through that multiple times during our labs. All rounds are securely mounted in the ceiling space or otherwise raceways, and the work is done according to the local building and electrical code. Right? So It's not terminated at both ends, but once you run those wires, this is when you mount the wires correctly. Okay. Before the rough in, you're gonna have to prepare the raceway, and sometimes it takes almost as long as pulling the wires, maybe a little bit less. But preparing the raceway is finding the pathways. Right? We'll cover that later on. What do you need for RAF for the pathways and raceways? Well, pathways and raceways. Okay, cable installation begins with establishing the pathways. Well, I told you we'll talk about it, and we're talking about it now. So I distinguished here free air runs and run in the raceways, or halfway in between. Like, for example, cable tray. It's in the raceway, but it's sort of in the free air. Yeah? Okay, so free air runs. Free air runs would be the ones that are mounted on the J-hooks, suspended in the ceiling. They are not in conduits. They're not enclosed. So free runs. Main runs should be kept in bundles and suspended independently of any ceiling structures. What would be the most used ceiling structures? It would be the drop ceiling. Right? See, what you have is in the building, you have the floor. Then you have the space you walk in, right, and breathe the air in. And then you're going to have a ceiling, and usually consisting of the ceiling tiles that are suspended on some metallic grid. Above the ceiling tiles that you can pop and take a look in the what's in the ceiling, there's going to be ceiling space, or plenum. Okay? And that is going to be topped up with the concrete slab, so it's called the true ceiling. And it could be the bottom of the floor above, but here's the ceiling that we're talking about, okay? So sometimes the plenum or the ceiling space could be 6 inches, could be 1 foot, could be 10 feet, could be 20 feet, right? Depending on the structure. Right? So the ceiling is suspended on the metallic grid that is basically hanging on the wires that are bolted to the true ceiling. And quite often, a lot of people would zip tie the wires that you run to the wires that are supporting the ceiling grid. That is not supposed to be done, right? All the wires are supposed to be hanging or suspended and supported independently of any other structure. The reason for that is mostly, believe it or not, fire regulations. Right? If there is, hopefully not, but if in case there is a fire, then the fire crews or the otherwise demolition crews or whatever, they're going to come down and they're going to have to bring some of the structure down in order to contain the fire or control the fire or whatever they do, the fire people, right? And they would have those hooks on the stick, right? Those grabbers, and they're going to try to bring those some of the ceiling down. If there's some other things, if there are some other things tied to that ceiling, it's going to be that much more dangerous for them, and they're in danger being there already. Okay, so that's why all the cabling has to be suspended independently in the ceiling, and something that's called the J hooks are very, very popular thing. We'll cover that further along. Okay? So as much as possible, establish straight runs so pulling multiple cables can be done efficiently. Well, if you have a home run, like a communication room or whatnot, then from that, you're going to have a bunch of bundles and they're going to be fanning out towards the building. So you're going to have to find some common areas. Like, for example, it's going to be a long hallway, and then at the end of the hallway, there's going to be 3 offices or 5 offices. So you're not going to run those wires by one and just going to mount them as it goes, because that's going to be non-efficient, very not efficient. You're going to establish some main bundles. You're going to get all those cables in that main bundle in the ceiling space. And once you get to that place where you can fan them out, and then just you're going to distribute them there. So that's what I mean. It should be done in the main cables should be kept in bundles and suspended independently for as much as possible. Establish straight runs. All right. So how do you establish a straight run? Quite often a string is being used. So you're going to try to get on the ladder, pop your head into the ceiling space and see, because sometimes the ceiling space has all kinds of other equipment. There's air ducts, there's some heat pumps, there are all kinds of other things installed. And sometimes the ceiling can be quite full. So you're going to have to establish straight runs. So you're bypassing all the other equipment, and sometimes it's easier than other times. Quite often it is possible. So you just run a string, right? You mount the string on one end, and you mount the string on the other end, and make it tight. It's going to give you a straight line. Use that as a guide to mount your J hooks. And J hooks are basically a hook that looks like a J, right? It's a J hook. It looks like this, right? Right, and this is where you run the wires inside the J hook, and that thing could be mounted to the wall, or it could be mounted through the threaded rod in the ceiling. Okay. And there are different sizes and shapes of and different brands of the J hooks. So these are the most popular ones. Now, when you establish straight pathway, because you're going to use that string as a guide for your J hooks, then you can use that string to tie the wires in and pull a bunch of wires, and you can tie a back string to it, so you pull another string with it, so you can use it to pull more wires. And if it's a straight line, line, if you're pulling 10, 12, 15 wires, sometimes it makes a huge difference, and sometimes it makes it actually possible to pull the wires in a straight line, other than if you had to go around some obstacles, right? So then you have to pull the slack here, pull the wires here, and then pull the wires on. So straight lines, right? J hooks mounted on the walls. J hooks mounted on the walls or suspended from the ceiling or threaded rods are the most common in this scenario. So I just explained that to you. Now, raceways. As the alternative to the freer method, closed raceways or cable trays are used. Cable tray is a raceway that is still having the wires exposed, right? So the wire is in a raceway, but is exposed. So technically it's a free air for the fire regulations purposes. You're gonna have to use something that's called FT6 rated wire, which doesn't burn as easily as the FT4, right? All the raceways should be installed before the cables are run. So you're not going to run the cables and mount the raceways at the same time. Very seldom that is the most efficient way. What's the most efficient way? You go on the job site, and according to the survey notes, according to the drawings, and according to the reality, because the reality can change. There could be something that they added on, maybe a different heat pump, and maybe something had to be moved from the plumbing things or heating ducts or whatever, and it's in your way. So you're going to have to, according to the drawings, the plan, the survey notes, and the reality, you're going to have to establish a real pathway for the cables, and that can take, depending on the size of the project, it can take you a half a day, it can take you a day, it could take you a week, 2 weeks, and sometimes it can take you a month, right, just to establish those. And once you establish those raceways, then you start doing the wire installations, right? And here's a hint. Oh, well, it's more than a hint. Position the J hooks no further than 4 feet apart to avoid cable sagging. What do I mean by that? Here's a ceiling space. There you go. Here's a J hook. Here's a J hook. Here's a J hook, and they just keep going, right? And then you run the bundles of wires in there. Those J hooks should be no more than 4 feet apart. Okay. Because if they're further, the cables are just going to, under their own weight, they're going to start sagging. Okay. And when the cables are sagging, there's a bundle of cables. Then the cable on the bottom has the worst, because the cables add up weight, and if it's a sagging thing, that's going to be the most stressful point for the wires, and it's going to be pushed. It's just like you're stepping on the wire here, right? So that's not good. So you can actually compromise the specs of the wire. So here, and that's where we're going to stop, because this is how we stopped last time, and this is a repeat of yesterday. So that's pretty much it for today, and we're going to pick it up next time we see each other. Okay, thank you guys for your attention, and I will see you next time when I see you. Have a great day.